Welcome to Living Well with Mary Lou Andre, a 30-minute monthly lifestyle program to help you live better on your own terms by being inspired by thought-provoking leaders who make the world a better place to live and thrive. I'm your host, Mary Lou Andre, and today I'm excited to introduce you to Allison Yee. As a little girl, Allison would close her eyes and dream about fashion. Not just the clothes, but the creativity, possibility, and excitement of bringing ideas to life. Armed with a degree in communications and fashion entrepreneurship from the University of Connecticut, she landed her first retail buying job right out of college and thought she had found her dream career. Then reality set in. Instead of dreaming about fashion, she found herself dreaming about spreadsheets. Rather than walking away from retail, Allison explored different corners of the industry, building a career that took her from WearGuard to ISIS maternity and ultimately to WS Development, one of the country's most innovative retail real estate companies. The multifaceted world of retail real estate allowed Allison to expand her skills and experiment with different retail business models, including pop-up retail operations. What began with convincing her boss to let her transform a former ice cream shop at the street in Chestnut Hill into an experimental pop-up space became the foundation for a much bigger vision. Today, Allison is the founder and CEO of UpNext, a company that helps entrepreneurs launch, grow, and thrive through pop-up retail experiences. Along the way, she has created opportunities for hundreds of small businesses while helping cities, property owners, and communities reimagine what retail can be. She's a connector, a community builder, and someone who has mastered the art of opening doors for others. Please join me in welcoming Allison Yee. Allison, thank you so much for coming in today. You have an extraordinary story, and I love to highlight entrepreneurs, and you have really covered a lot of ground in the retail space. So to get started, let's go back to graduating from college, all excited to get into the job field, the job market, and you land what you think is your dream job, which is retail buying. And you're there for how long before you decide that it's really not your thing, or was it immediate?
It wasn't very long. It was within the first few months that I realized that what I thought I was setting out to do and what my day-to-day reality was were really not one and the same. But it took more like 3 years to realize that I wasn't going to find my path there. And then I set out looking for other scenarios and trying lots of different hats on.
Yeah, and I know that you went from there to WearGuard, another iconic brand in our world here in New England, and then ISIS Maternity, and then you ended up at WS Real Estate Development, which is where things got interesting. So pick up the story from there.
So I spent about 7 years at WS, and I worked in a lot of different sides of the business. So it's retail real estate development, which means that they have different retail properties, lifestyle centers with a huge mix of local, national, regional brands. And so I worked on the marketing front with all kinds of campaigns and events. And I also worked as the general manager at The Street, which is a property here in Chestnut Hill where the company is headquartered. And then I stumbled into pop-ups, you could say, because there was a lot of interest in the next phase of development. So the leasing team was really focused on the big new wave, but in the meantime I was managing a property that had a lot of holes in terms of what people were looking for and what local representation we had. So I just got the green light to take a little under-recognized space and transform it into one of the area's first pop-up concepts. And that was the beginning.
Yeah, and it was an ice cream store that we had to go. And you said, I see this space a little bit differently. And that's a lot of what you do today in your own business, which we'll get to in a moment. But take our viewers, I think there is a lot of fascination and probably a little bit of curiosity around pop-up. So how do you define what actually pop-up retail operations are?
Oh, that's such a good question. So it's typically, in our world, we define it as anything from a day or a weekend, a very short-term retail activation, all the way up to a year. So we have brands that are looking to test at all different stages and phases of growth. Anything beyond a year we consider permanent, and a lot of our pop-ups will eventually decide to stay in a space or to lease a permanent space, but it's this really nice low-risk entry point into the retail waters.
Okay, and you shared a story with me about the brand that took over the ice cream store. Can you share a little bit more about that, because it sounded very magical, and it really was. It sounds like it was a career turnaround for you.
Sure. Well, we had a series of different brands take over the ice cream space, but the very first one, if that's what you're recalling, was a bagel shop. So we had transformed the space to be, instead of covered in mirrored ceiling tiles and orange orbs and ice cream signage, it was sort of a blank canvas. It was this white box space, and we had an art installation coming into the property that was amazing. These giant bagel statues that were all over the street, and we didn't have any great bagels at the property. And so how can you have statues inspiring people to eat bagels without something to munch on? So I set out to find that first brand who would understand the concept of a pop-up and really embrace the opportunity. And eventually I found a gentleman who was actually the wholesale distributor, so on a completely different end of the business for another bagel company. He got it right away. He said, I can do this. I'd love to have this opportunity. And so for 6 weeks, he did a takeover of the space, serving up fresh, hot bagels every day, really building up a following. And ultimately, fast forward just a couple of years, he ended up leasing a permanent space right there at the street under the name The Bagel Table, and opening several others, I think up to 7 different locations all around Massachusetts. So it really was a transformation from day one with the whole pop-up experience.
Yeah, and the pop-up does allow entrepreneurs to kind of test drive retail before getting so far into it that they might go bankrupt. So talk a little bit about the power of it and how it really does help entrepreneurs and drive new businesses.
Sure. So having seen the risk that independent businesses, entrepreneurs, founders are facing if they are interested in being in a retail property, if they're not sure if that's how they want to spend their day-to-day, and knowing that traditional leases are typically a minimum of 3, 5, 10 years, where you're putting literally everything on the line. You need to go through the financial vetting, you need to mortgage your home, whatever it may be. This is a completely different approach. So the whole ideal scenario is that we're very upfront, transparent about the opportunity. This is what it costs to be in this space. This is how long it's available. This is who we're looking for, the type of brand, the consumer, the demographic. And so it's really an eyes wide open opportunity that's very different from how commercial real estate typically works. And the rent is very accessible. So either it's just a short-term commitment at somewhere around market rate, or it's a percentage, more of a partnership approach, or something else altogether. There's so much room for creativity, and so by thinking about it in those terms, we're able to give that foot in the door and give the business a chance to have a proof of concept and see what they want to do long-term, what they can afford, how it evolves.
Awesome. So how long did you stay at WS after the bagel launch? How long did you stay in that job?
I have to think about that one. So I think that was probably 2012, 2014 was the beginning. So I was sort of wearing multiple hats, doing the GM role and pop-ups, and then I came back from maternity leave after my first child, so in 2014, into a new role, which was leading retail incubation and pop-ups for the company. So we started to expand it around the portfolio. So we did many more pop-ups after that, but in early 2018, I left and launched UpNext.
Okay, and when you say portfolio, just so the audience knows,
sure.
It's the street, Derby Street in Hingham, Legacy Place.
Legacy
in
Place
Dedham,
in Dedham,
and
Market Street, Linfield, Seaport, so a lot around Massachusetts, but they also own properties in Florida and all over, so then I was finding myself on a plane a lot more than I anticipated.
And how, Boston was late to the game of pop-ups. Where did it originate? Was it the West Coast?
So in the United States, California, New York, Boston was probably in that next wave, maybe Texas, Boston snuck in there in the mix. But Yes, I would say
Yeah.
a little bit later than those early adopter locations. with
Okay,
all
so
the-
really exciting stuff. And then, so it's 2018. Share with the audience that moment when you said, I'm going to open up my own business.
Oh, it was the most terrifying
Yeah.
and liberating decision of my life.
Mm-hmm.
I had always been very entrepreneurial,
Mhm.
always had a side hustle or some business idea that I was developing, but I had never really given myself permission to consider full-time entrepreneurship. Well, family, responsibilities, bills to pay. But I felt like if I didn't do it then, I never would. I felt like this was the window of opportunity and the field that felt right for me to spend my focus and time and energy on and take that chance.
Yeah. So what did permission look like for you? How did you give yourself permission?
Conversations with my husband, a lot of pouring into a notebook and testing different scenarios for myself and just experimenting with how this could work, how it could sustain my own life,
Yeah.
and then ultimately blind faith. I mean, there was no pop-up model for me to do this at the
Okay.
time, so I had to create that for others.
Awesome. And part of the show is to really inspire others. So I'd love to hear everyone that has sat down with me that is an entrepreneur has said they had that. It's that moment in time, and you're either going to go for it or you're not. And there usually is a little voice in the head that, just as you articulated so well, you got to give yourself permission, and you got to kind of believe in yourself. So,
Yes.
and the other part of your story that I really love is that you've kept going. So you started with the original brand, which is still very much vibrant, is a big piece of what you do on a day-to-day basis, and you have two sister brands within the core brand. So everyone has the everyone has the entrepreneur story. They also have the pandemic story, and your pandemic story actually led to business number 2. So can you share with the audience that part of your journey?
Sure, the pandemic pivot, as they say. So in early 2020, we had just launched a matchmaking portal through our website so we could more easily connect brands and spaces. And that was all through brick and mortar in-person retail. Everything shut down. Found myself wondering what would happen next, what was up next for us.
So you're in business 2 years. You started
So-
in 2018, pandemic's
2
2020.
years.
So you're 2 years. And actually, before we get into the second piece of your business, can you just explain what your core business does? Like what
Sure,
is, yes,
sure.
Yes, what is your
So
business?
ultimately, we help matchmake between brands, emerging brands,
Mm-hmm.
independent local brands who are looking to find a place to test and grow their business. So it could be anything from a storefront to a market to a collaboration. And we're connecting them with property owners. So excess capacity, vacant spaces, interim vacancy, all different types of things. And really, I think the definition of it has just continued to expand. But essentially putting those two together, making sure it's an excellent match, and then seeing where that can go. So that's sort of the
Yeah.
core.
So you really have two customers. You
Yes,
have the
at least.
landlord, at least, and then the entrepreneur that's being given this opportunity. And
Yes.
actually, the second business that was born during the pandemic, you have a third client, the government.
Yes, exactly.
So definitely
So-
jump back into that story now.
Sure. So at the time, so I've been on the Charles River Regional Chamber Board for some time. We were meeting virtually for the first time in history then, and continue to do so. So some improvements with the technology, but essentially I hopped on a Zoom. This particular board meeting, we had a guest. It was the City of Newton's mayor at the time, Ruth Ann Fuller, and we were talking about the curveballs that had been thrown our way. And I think I just asked a simple question, like, what are we doing to incentivize landlords who now are finding themselves with higher than ever levels of vacancy as businesses close? What are we doing to incentivize them to lease the space instead of sit on the tax break until a bank or a real estate office or someone who can pay the previous market rate rent comes along? And that was the beginning of what we now call Project Pop-Up. So that conversation led to further conversations with the City of Newton's Economic Development Director, Needham's Economic Development Director, Amy, who at the time was running economic development, and then applying for a grant through these new conversations and relationships through the Massachusetts Office of Economic Development to open pop-ups, to revitalize storefronts, to give entrepreneurs that chance to really see if it can work at one of the most challenging times in history. And this, for me, was a dream come true, not only because we had an opportunity for ourselves, but because instead of simply being able to connect the two parties, we were now opening that up to include stipends that brought the market rent down to something reasonable and affordable, and build out the spaces and turn them into these turnkey, beautiful spaces that a brand could move right into without having to think about all of the layers of logistics and permitting and pieces that are involved in launching a storefront. So we really shrunk the time of going through to find a permanent storefront and a long-term lease. And we were doing that already, but this added so much dimension to how we could support these entrepreneurs. So along with our direct support, our one-on-one support, they then could run their stores and in many cases share spaces and resources. So matchmaking also among founders. And it just really expanded the possibilities in so many ways. And now we had this new client, the city, the town.
Which I just love. I mean, you're so entrepreneurial, and I love that you're able to combine your obvious love of business with creativity and entrepreneurship. And you really are opening doors to folks that really need that. So thank you. I love your story. And share with the audience, go back to that moment in time. Like, is there one or two entrepreneurs that you can call up and share a little bit about how you changed their life and actually how they changed yours?
Oh, sure. There's so many. There's a couple that come to mind pretty quickly from those early days. So we opened 8 pop-up storefronts at once through Project Pop-Up the summer of 2021, which was a lot.
Did you say 8?
8. 8 all at once.
Oh my goodness. If you want to get something done, give it to a busy working mom, Allison. Wow, 8 in the summer of 20. Wow, okay.
So
you're on the call with Mayor Fuller in early 2020, and this is now happening like a year
so
later.
I think it was actually fall of 2020 or early 2021.
Okay,
so within a matter of months,
we had
taken this. We were awarded the grant, so we had the waiting process, and then had the opportunity to run with it in a very short window in which to execute. So we just rolled up our sleeves and started making calls and showing up places, and took 8 vacancies and created pop-up opportunities for. It was probably 15 different entrepreneurs. It was so many who were sharing space or rotating through. But in Newton, we had one in Newton Center, one in Newton Highlands. And in Newton Highlands, ultimately that 3-month pop-up turned into well over a year with some convergence of brands who were in other locations. So there are 2 brands that come to mind. One is Hedgehog Belly Designs, and one is Garcia Cristina Jewelry. So 2 very different categories, but with an overlapping audience. So children's clothing that is sustainable and locally made and just fun and durable, all of the things that a parent would look for, whimsical. And then a jewelry brand that's very timeless, classic, delicate, inspired by architecture and design. And the 2 founders behind these businesses, Isabel and Christina, they met through Project Pop-Up. They met through the storefront experience. And they went 2 different directions after, but they continue to collaborate regularly. We've hosted them for programming. They've built their businesses up in such amazing ways where they really felt like it, for Hedgehog Belly, for example, legitimized the brand, took it from something that lived online in local nooks and crannies to something that people could identify and experience with, a whole aesthetic. And she's amazing. And that was really proof of concept for her. And then additionally for Christina, it was the proof that she needed that she didn't want to do retail day to day. So she opened a studio space outside her home. She liked that part, having some separation from home, but continued to do lots of markets and grow her brand in other ways. So 2 different outcomes, 2 different directions, but lifelong friendship, business collaborations, really just, you never know how your paths will continue to cross.
Yeah, and it can be really lonely being a business owner and entrepreneur. So I love that actually the third piece of your model is bringing entrepreneurs together. So talk about the third piece next.
You hit the nail on the head. It can be so isolating, especially in the early stages or if you don't have a team. I felt very alone in the first 6 months or so before the team built up. But essentially, the Retail Playground is a community that we built and the most recent addition to our business. So it's really designed to help founders in the retail and experience space find connection, education, resources, share their wins, share their challenges, come together online live or in the forum to ask questions of each other, and then also occasionally in person. So we'll host events around here in partner locations.
And so online connection plus in-person meetings and all around supporting entrepreneurship.
Yes.
And serving your clients in a new way, which I think is brilliant. I think when you get kind of niche in on who you're serving, the more services you add, just stronger the partnership. So I love that that has brought your business full circle at the moment. I'm sure there's many more avenues, Missy, by the time it's done. But the other question I thought that everyone in the audience would love to know is what's on the horizon, especially in Needham? Is there anything interesting happening? Anything popping up?
You could say that. So we have a newly established partnership with the Village Bank, which is a community-based bank originated in Newton, is opening locations in Wellesley and Needham in the next year, and we are partnering with them to bring retail incubator space, local retail shops, directly into the branches. So this is very exciting to me because it's shaking up an industry that is very ripe for innovation, and they're amazing partners. And essentially, it will be a retail storefront dedicated to brands to rotate through. We run the application process and do the matchmaking and the operational infrastructure. By day, during business banking hours, there's a glass nano wall that opens and people can just flow between the two spaces. And then after business hours, that wall can close so the retailer can continue to operate more standard hours or do evening events or whatever they'd like with the space. And it's completely free to the entrepreneur. So that's just really amazing.
So the bank is really thinking entrepreneurially, and of course a lot of their customers are entrepreneurs. And I did read about it in the paper, so I know I'm not letting any secrets out. But EA Davis, the old EA Davis in Wellesley, is where one of the locations is going to be, right?
Correct, yes.
And how about Needham? Where's that location?
In Needham, so currently Masala Art, the restaurant, is planning to close at some point in the year, and so the lease will be going to Village Bank and to the Village Shop, which is what we're calling the retail concept there.
Very interesting. Okay, so as we start to wrap up here, first of all, how can our viewers find you? Website, email, how can they find you, Allison?
Sure, of course. So they can find us online, UpNext.com, and that'll link you over to our Project Pop-Up and the Retail Playground websites. We're on Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook, all the places. They can follow me personally on Instagram at the Allison Yee. And so please reach, I love hearing from people.
So all
reach out anytime.
Any entrepreneur out there that is thinking about retail space, Allison's your gal. You've got so many great resources. And then the last question that I like to ask my guests, what does living well mean to you, Allison?
I love this question, Mary Lou. I thought about this a lot over the years, and I think living well means finding fulfillment. So finding with my work, it feels really meaningful. It fills my bucket in so many ways, and so I look forward to it every day. But in addition, it gives me the flexibility to support my family. I have 3 children, husband, my mom's with us. There's just so many amazing people in my life that I want to be there for and spend time with. So when you can have those things, I think it's living well.
Awesome. And I like how the young gal at college who left with all those dreams, you've been able to pivot so many times, and now where you are, you've combined your skills in such a beautiful way, and I just wish you the best, and I can't wait to see what's next for you. Thank you so much for coming in and sharing your story. Really awesome. Thank you so much, Allison.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure.
Awesome. Thank you.